President Biden's student loan debt relief plan is on the chopping block. On Tuesday, the Supreme Court will hear arguments about whether his proposal to forgive up to $20,000 in debt belonging to qualifying borrowers is constitutional. Now, the administration says that Education Secretary Miguel Cardona has full authority under the HEROES Act to forgive the debt.
So the HEROES Act was passed after 9/11, and it gave the Education Secretary the power to waive or tweak federal student financial assistance programs in times of war or national emergency. Former President Trump began using this measure at the onset of the pandemic, but President Biden then expanded it. So what do you think, Robby?
Well, so you and I are both, very skeptical and opposing of the student debt forgiveness plan. Brianna, our other co-host, is very, very, very supportive of it. But I think even she concedes that the HEROES Act argument is not very compelling for the rationale to be able to do this. And she would point to, she thinks it is perfectly constitutional, but she would point to other laws that she thinks gives the executive the power to do that. The problem with the HEROES Act is that it was clearly just not designed to cover this sort of circumstance. It was about forgiving loan debt for veterans or for people who are answering the call to serve America in the wars on terror. Also, even if we're reading HEROES Act to have the kind of emergency that would include a pandemic, the pandemic is over. Joe Biden said the words, the pandemic is over. So how would he still have the authority to do this if we're not in that emergency anymore? So it was really a very bad justification. And actually, I think there are some on the left who support student debt relief who think Biden chose this, who kind of have a very anti-Biden mindset and think he was deliberately sabotaging this by using this justification because it's not going to hold up in the Supreme Court. But I guess we'll have to see. I don't like the policy, so I would be happy to see it defeated by whatever means, and I don't think the HEROES Act covers it. But what are you expecting to see from the Supreme Court justices?
Well, I think Brianna has made a very convincing argument that this was designed to fail, right? Mm-hmm. So whether you like it or not, she makes the argument that you can't give Biden credit for being a progressive for having done this because he did it in a way where it was designed to fail so that he wouldn't then have to take responsibility for the political fallout. And I think she's done a great job of substantiating that argument. I don't know. I couldn't say which way the Supreme Court is going to go, but just again, I think if they had limited it to Americans who started college and now work in the service industry, right? There are, about 10% of service industry workers have some college under their belt, right? These are people who are making, $20, $30, $50, $60,000 a year and paying student loans, right? I think a lot of Americans feel for people like that who tried to go the college route, it didn't work out, and now are stuck without the benefit of a college degree, but while paying those loans. I think a lot of Americans, including myself, have a lot of sympathy for people stuck in that situation. The people we don't have sympathy for are people who are also would be counted under this for forgiveness, who are at the beginning of what is going to turn into an extremely lucrative career, making $75,000 a year, right? Beginning of, maybe they are a law clerk, right? Maybe they are, in their first job as an accountant, right? Even somebody like a dental hygienist, right, who might have some student loan, right? But they're going to be making good money at some point. And for those people to get a bailout from working class Americans, from all those service industry workers who didn't get the benefit of a college degree, from all of those people who maybe went to trade school, right, and paid off their loans, right? And, there's something about that one rebels against it, especially when you think about, who is likely to be in the home ownership class. It's overwhelmingly people with a college degree are not struggling in the same way. Maybe they are millennials in 30s and 40s, right? Early 20s, 30s, right? These people are behind where many of their parents were at, but they are going to catch up as they get into their late 40s, certainly by their 50s. So the idea that a college degree now buys you less privilege over working class Americans than it did your parents' generation. I'm sorry, but to me, that's just not the civil rights cause that progressives want me to believe it is.
And we're kicking the can down the road in terms of addressing the real problem, which is the cost problem. And for this, on this part of it, the students, the frustrated debtors are absolutely right that it's ridiculous that they had to go into this level of debt to pay for college. This wasn't true a generation or two ago, where you could work and you could afford college, and then the diploma gave you a good chance at a middle class lifestyle or beyond. That's not doable anymore because the price has gotten insane. But we have to scrutinize, why that is. It's the most higher education is aggressively subsidized, and clearly making these loans has had a distorting effect on the price. Meanwhile, the colleges have just all recklessly hired armies of bureaucrats, and they make nicer dorms and they invest in everything but the actual quality of the education, but the actual instruction. They didn't raise. We're not in this crisis because professors are being paid too much. Their wages have barely budged. They haven't hired more of them. They've passed the work onto adjuncts who are paid starvation wages. So it's a totally out of whack system, and we have to talk about reforming that. I think it's fine for state universities, for institutions that are state managed and that are supported by the taxpayers of a state. Well, those institutions should be affordable to taxpayers. The legislature could cap the amount they're allowed to charge for a credit. That's something peer nations do. That makes all the sense in the world to me. I don't think the government should make the whole thing free. You should, because then again we're subsidizing people who get more of a benefit. The people who are directly getting the benefit are the ones who should pay for it. But it should be affordable the way it used to be, and we can change that. We could do that, but nobody's really proposing doing that.
I know, it's very frustrating. And then, when you do have certain things, you have, for example, Ron DeSantis, who's now, trying to take over the board of a public university and sort of create a less wokeified curriculum, which, God bless him. I think that's a great idea, but it doesn't get to the problem that you just mentioned, which is these rising costs due in many cases to DEI consultants and whatnot, right? Which is, if a college degree used to be the pathway to upward mobility, today it's sort of the gatekeeper because it is so exorbitant, it is so expensive. And instead, I believe that we should be taking all of this public money and putting it into vocational training, because when you look at the job market, that's where we're missing workers, right? Who are highly trained labor, highly trained working class Americans to take those jobs. That's where the big labor shortage is. There's no labor shortage of, college professors and journalists, right? That's all sort of taken care of. So we're in this sort of elite overproduction situation. And I would say take all of that public funding and put it where we need it most.
Yeah, or don't do exactly what they're doing now. We'll be back in this situation. You could forgive all this debt, or exactly what the Biden plan wants to do, and a couple years later, it will have been reaccumulated because we haven't changed the underlying 100%. Incentives whatsoever. In fact, they're going to make the incentives worse by doing this plan where you can have the debt forgiven if you just pay a portion of your income, which the Biden plan wants to move to. That idea on its own is not a terrible idea if it was just that, but because you still have the loan system, well, if nobody is going to be paying back what they actually borrowed, and the government's just going to pay it back, and you're going to pay back, part of your income, what is the limiting factor to stop the college from they could charge $1 trillion for tuition. They charge $1 trillion, you borrow $1 trillion, you pay 10% of your income, and everybody wins except the taxpayers who actually have to pay the $1 trillion. It makes no sense. So I'll be interested to see what the Supreme Court decides about this version of the Biden plan. I don't think they will like the HEROES Act justification, but we will have to see, and we'll have more Rising right after this.